Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends over at Galactic Comics and Collectibles in Bangor, Maine. You can find them at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com and check out their stuff like their TMNT #1 exclusive by our buddy Bob Takic. But this episode, we talked to the creators of This Land Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle Story, writer Julio Anta and artist Jacoby Salcedo. They're here to talk about their book. It comes out October 1st from DC Comics. It's an original graphic novel origin story about Blue Beetle. And it's so amazing, so timely, so poignant, so wonderfully illustrated and wonderfully written that you should all check it out and so on. But Julio and Jacoby are also the Eisner-nominated creators of books like Frontera, as well as other things that are out there, including Jacoby's come on in the past to talk about his comic with Curt Pires, It's Only Teenage Wasteland. But this episode, they're here to talk about a Blue Beetle story. This Land Is Our Land. So check that out. But before you do, find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, all that stuff. Subscribe, rate, review, all that stuff over on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcasts, as well as check our YouTube channel out and our website, capesandtights.com, for so much more stuff and beyond on there, including a review of a Blue Beetle story, This Land Is Our Land. But yeah, check this out. This is Jacoby and Julio talking their graphic novel, This Land Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle story. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. How are you? Both of you, I guess.
Good. Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good.
We're good. Thanks for having us.
Well,
Yeah,
welcome. I was reached out to by someone, a publisher, about having someone on the podcast, and like, can you get all three creators on there? And I'm like, geez, yes, we can, but that's a lot of trying to figure out who's talking, when they're going to talk, and so on and so forth. I like this. This is the max I like, is the two people.
Hopefully the two of us is okay.
Yes,
we'll see.
We can do it. I don't know. Jacoby might steal all the thunder here. You might talk too much. I don't know. We'll see.
That happens.
Well, I mean, like I was saying right before we recorded, Jacoby's been on here to talk. It's Only Teenage Wasteland, which is a wonderful comic over there at Dark Horse. But we're here to talk This Land Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle story, which is an original graphic novel coming out from DC here in October. So, but before we jump too far into it, Julio, do you want to give us a little background on how you got into comics and into writing comics and so on?
Yeah, sure. So I had, I kind of came up in music and playing in bands, writing for zines, booking shows, and I had a record label essentially. And I had started really like focusing on other people's creativity rather than my own. I'd stopped playing in bands. I was just running the label. And then I just felt this push to go back into my own creative work. And at the time, my first book was a book called Home. And I've been a comic book reader, for as long as I can remember, really, And with my first book, Home, the idea for Home is really what inspired me to become a comic book writer. I essentially taught myself and looked for resources, things like the Brian Michael Bendis book, Words with Pictures, things like that, comic scripts. I did all that in service of wanting to write a comic based on the idea of home, essentially. So that's, I guess it's a very abbreviated version, but the slightly longer version is I started doing mini comics, which also brings us to how me and Jacoby met, which I got in the advice that instead of starting off with like a mini series or the big like magnum opus that you want to create as a comic creator, which for me was Home, you should work on your writing chops and also get your name out there by doing mini comics and short 4 to 10 page comics. So that's what I started doing. And with my second one, I hit up Jacoby. I'd seen his work online. I didn't know him at all yet, so I just cold emailed him, gave him a brief little pitch on what this 7-page comic was going to be. And he was on board from the beginning, and he obviously killed it, did an amazing job. We became friends that way, and we just kept making more mini comics together. And eventually that led to making our first graphic novel, which is called Frontera, that came out last year. And then that leads to Blue Beetle, essentially, with DC, seeing our work and asking me what is my take on Blue Beetle, and then dragging Jacoby along with me too. So
I love it. I watched. I had COVID a month and a half ago, and I was stuck at home, and I was like, "What do I want to watch that's not like I need to pay super attention to? Because if I fall asleep, I don't want to miss something, and so on and so forth." So somehow I got on West Wing, and I was watching West Wing, and I don't know why. And now I'm like stuck, and I feel like I have to watch it, finish it. But on the show, they was doing this. They did this bet, and they were at a bar, and they said, if you lose this bet, then everybody you see for the rest of the day, you have to tell them that you work for the White House. And so you have to be like, "Hi, my name is Justin, and I work for the White House." And someone on the show eventually goes, it'd be a lot cooler if we found that out on our own that you work for the White House and that you showing off that you work for the White House. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to say the Eisner-nominated Frontera. So you didn't have to say it to tell anybody and make it out there, but it is an Eisner-nominated original graphic novel. So congratulations to that for both of you. It's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you learned that lesson on Sam's expense. I think it was Sam who lost that bet, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There it is, Frontera.
Nice.
And actually, I think this is the one that it says to Justin from Jacoby in there.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's kind of funny. Yeah, so you don't want to continue being like, I'm Eisner nominated. Yes, me Eisner nominated, a writer and artist here. But no, Frontera. It's just over a year now that it's been out, so that's pretty cool. I mean, we can touch on that really quickly. What's that been like? How's the Eisner nominations been like? How's that been like for both of you guys?
It was surprising, and also very validating of the work that we do. Frontera, for those who aren't aware, it's a story about this undocumented immigrant crossing the border to make it back home to the US. And along the way, he meets the ghost of a migrant that died in that same desert, nearly 100 years ago, who has seen the way that the border has changed and how it's become more dangerous, and how immigrants have become more vilified over those years. So, for a book of those themes to be nominated for an Eisner was very surprising to us, but also, again, validating and, really special. My only complaint is I wish the food was a little better at the Eisners, but, but that's it,
I won't complain about that. I
Jacoby actually liked the food.
There you go.
They had a solid brownie, dude. It was nice and gooey. I loved it.
I just love how that's the takeaway when you don't win the Eisner Award. You're like,
you
the
gotta
food
focus
sucked.
on the other thing. They had an open bar like it.
I think the thing is too is like we had no expectations. We're just happy to be there. We were. I am proud to say that I guessed who the winner of our category was going to be. Which that's a prize in itself, but yeah, we were just really honored, and hopefully that nomination brought more eyes to the book, and that's what matters.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that winning or not winning, you still can always say that you were nominated. They can never take that away from you, which is awesome. It's awesome kind of thing. I mean, think about it. Out of all the graphic novels that could have been in that category and all the different awards, I mean, our friend David Harper was nominated in the media,
shout out to
media
David.
section. Yeah, which is awesome. And same thing, he went into it, be like, I have no expectations on this. Like, if I win, cool, but if I don't, that's not like whatever. I'm going to San Diego. This is amazing. To be there and be like, oh, I'm here for a reason, not just because I'm visiting. I'm actually here because I could win an award. It's a fun thing. So when I saw that, it jumped out at me too, which was pretty cool to see that. Yeah, and have a book of that meaning to be nominated is pretty cool. And then it's a beautiful book. I think everybody should get it. One of the cool things I love about trades and graphic novels is that they're available at bookstores and at your local comic book store. So if you don't have an LCS near you, you can always go to a local or a local bookstore and say, "Can you please get this book for me?" And pick that up, which is pretty cool. It's at Harper Collins, I believe.
It's
their book publisher.
Yeah, their imprint Harper Alley.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I do a lot of book stuff too, and I still am so confused by I'm confused by the comic book publishing side of things, but the book publishing side of things is even more confusing, in my opinion. And that's where, I mean, it leads to this too. I mean, This Land Is Our Land is a DC comic. It's based on Blue Beetle as the character, but it's also a graphic novel, so it's in the book market style. Look at that, you have it right in front of you, right in your hands.
For the video watchers.
I was lucky. It was funny because I was talking back and forth with Jacoby about reading it and getting it, reading it before you guys had released it of the comic, and NetGalley had it because it's a book publishing
Mhm.
side of things too. So I was able to read it on there, which is a little weird because the app is not designed for graphic novels. You know what I mean? Like it's designed for books. So like it was like very choppy, and I feel like it when it went to load, it was loading really slowly because
Yeah.
it's very graphic intensive. But yeah, I got to read it. I got to enjoy it. I got to be immersed in the comic book, and so that was fun to do that. But yeah, so how I mean, you said quickly on how you got involved in it, but like this is a big thing. And I will say that sort of, not to get Jacoby in trouble or anything like that, but like we signed
Uh-oh.
off last time we recorded and he says, I got something coming. He didn't say what it was, but he did say he's got something coming that I
Yeah.
should keep an eye out. And when I heard, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So
something.
It could have been a lot of different things,
it could have
but
been a lot of different things. But yes,
with us,
there's a
I-
lot out there that could
this
have
is
been.
one of those things. He did say it was big, and my
Yeah.
interpretation of that was big two kind of thing. If you think about big, it's
Mm.
like a big two thing. But yeah, with This Land Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle story. I mean, they contacted you, you mentioned, and you're on the book and it's coming out. Like, how did that go, and how did it the creating the story come about?
Yeah, so I was part of a program at DC called the Milestone Initiative. And this was a program, for underrepresented creators, based on like the ethos of the Milestone Comics company that DC now owns. And it was like it was kind of like a fellowship, where they bring you in for like 6 months. You do classes with them online. You also go and I think we spent like 4 or 5 days in Burbank, going to the offices, meeting a bunch of editors. And we also all got paired with an editor. And the editor that I was paired with, Courtney, worked in the Young Readers division. And I had already, obviously, I had written Frontera. I think they might have had a PDF of it. It hadn't come out yet. But they knew that was the space that I tend to work in a lot, the book market, graphic novel side. So once the program was over, Courtney and I, we'd gotten to know each other. We had a great time working together. And she essentially just asked me, do you have any thoughts or ideas on Blue Beetle? Which was super exciting to me because Blue Beetle is, if you asked me at the time, you can write any DC character. Because I'm not as business savvy as maybe I should be, I wouldn't say Batman.
Yeah.
I would have said Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
So, I was ready. I was ready. The Blue Beetle movie hadn't come out yet, so I hadn't seen it. All I knew, the only like little bit of insider information I had is that it was not based in El Paso. And to me, and I'll also just say I loved the film. I thought it was great. I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved like all of the references, that really, I think it was funny for anyone to watch it, but I think like for the Latino community especially, there were a lot of things that like we grew up with that we're seeing, on the screen that, it's kind of like a wink and a nod, like this is made by people like you. But so I love the movie. But for me, a big part of Jaime Reyes is the fact that he's in El Paso. And as somebody who tends to write like very grounded stories with maybe just like one twist in it, Frontera, it's the ghost, home, it's the superpowers. But everything else is just straight grounded work. The fact that he is in a real US city, which very few of the DC heroes are, and that it's, this border community, to me opens up so many possibilities. And I immediately knew that that's where I wanted my story to be. And I wanted it to be like my other work, grounded, all based on true events. And that's what it ended up being. In interviews about Frontera, I said this, and the same applies to this book. Everything that happens in this book is real, with the exception of, an alien bug attaching to this kid's back and giving him superpowers. It's a big thing, but that's the only thing that isn't real. But I at the time, most of the work that I do tends to just come out of my own curiosities, my own interests, my point of view. What am I thinking about? What do I want to, what do I think is important enough to address in the work? And what I was thinking about a lot at the time was, obviously the immigration crisis that was happening at the border. some of it manufactured, some of it organic, and because of a lot of climate issues. And then also the way that teenagers are being radicalized by, right-wing sources and these social media algorithms that favor right-wing sources and push kids down this road. And I kind of made a connection early on between that and the experience that Jaime has with the Scarab, which is also a radicalizing presence that pushes him to his most base instincts, and wants to use him as uh, their vessel for, their violent invasion of Earth, right? So I saw a lot of parallels between that, and that was interesting to me. So I kind of just, explored that and eventually landed on the story.
And Jacoby, were you attached at the beginning, or was this something that came out later on?
So I wasn't attached to the beginning, but it was something that like I've been tracking that Julio was pitching, and then like it was kind of came up with, hey, what's your schedule looking like? Even though he definitely knows my schedule because everything we're doing is together. So it's more so, you think you can do this? And I was
Yeah.
like, probably not, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
We're gonna find out.
We're gonna make it
Yeah,
work.
and we found out and it worked out. And yeah, but it was just something where every time he would like pitch it or like tell me the pitch, I was like, they're not gonna do that. And then they accepted it, and then he showed me the script. I was like, no way they're gonna green like this. And then yeah, the next thing you know, I'm drawing it, and I'm just like, okay, I
Yeah.
guess we're this. We got this far, and that's been honestly the super like interesting part, just how much like we were able to do. Like it wasn't, I felt like it wasn't reserved at all. Like,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
both
I
think that
think
you
the
had a
only
little bit
feed.
more freedom because of the fact that it was a graphic novel outside of a
Oh
floppy
yeah.
single issue week to week or month to month thing where they might have been more constraints on you?
Yeah, for sure. I think a few things, like just to like double back on what
Yeah,
Jacoby is
yeah, so
saying.
yeah.
I didn't think they would, and again, because I maybe am not, I don't think of the work like as business savvy as I should. I when I pitch things, I try not to self-censor. Like
Mhm.
I know what they might be, the editors and the whole editorial department, everybody who greenlights these books. I know what they might be thinking when they read these pitches. But despite that, I try to just give like an unfiltered pitch of, if no one was going to stop me, this is exactly what I want to do. And then I let them tell me what I can't do, right? And then we go from there. So I try not to practice like any self-censorship when I pitch. So I did that again for this book with the expectation that they would pull me back. And then, I'd make edits and we'd find like a happy medium. But that didn't happen in the pitching process. That didn't happen in the scripting process. I worked with a really great editor who, gave me a lot of notes on like the characters and maybe you should think of this. But I never felt constrained. And to your point, I think a big part of that is that it's a graphic novel. And that it's all written at
Mhm.
once, but way before anybody reads it, right? Like in the single issue market, you might be writing issue 4 or 5 when issue 1 comes out. And if this was being serialized as single issues, it's very possible that when issue 1 comes out and there's potentially a backlash to it, I'm getting notes on issue 4 or issue 5, and I'm being told to bring things back, pull
Yeah.
things back, right? So yeah, I think we get a lot of freedom in the fact that it's a graphic novel, and also that it is not necessarily marketed to these uh trying to be diplomatic in how I say this. But these more toxic
Yes.
single issue fandom communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that really worked in our benefit for sure.
Yeah, I'm just picturing in my head that people. I could picture like the person at my LCS or the person walking in and being like, "That would not have bought this book," in my head, and I'm just like, "Oh God, no, please stop." But no, and also, I mean, I think you mentioned it before too, with the whole not Batman not being business savvy on that sense, but like, it's also Blue Beetle, so you have a little bit more of a.
Mhm.
This is not one of the big top 3, 4, 5
Sure.
core characters in the DC universe, and so having that ability to play with it and also have it. I mean, what kind of you couldn't tell this story really with Batman, or I mean, with
Yeah,
Superman, I guess
no,
you
no.
can, but it's more of a intergalactic type, like being a
Yeah.
foreigner from another, you know,
hmm
planet, not a different country, or area. But yeah, that's gonna the Blue Beetle thing. I'm also glad that I read this and this was out after the movie because I really finished. I liked the movie a lot. I did like it, and I'm not a huge DC person, and so I'm definitely not a huge DC movie person. And so when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is really good. But I feel like if I read this story prior, I would have been like, I really wanted it to be this story. do you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
I
that's
would much
very
rather have
sweet.
had this story and so I'm glad it was the opposite because at least I got to enjoy that as that, and this is this, and not have to be interfered with either one of them. Because and someone did write that on. I do search the internet a little bit, and on Goodreads, one of your reviews was, "This is better than the movie." And that was like literally the only review. And I was like, I guess that's a pretty good review, I guess.
Well,
when someone likes
that's
the
very
We'll
sweet,
take
but
it.
I would encourage everyone to watch the movie,
Yes.
because the movie is good, and I hope that that Blue Beetle, Xolo the actor, I hope that he's
Yes.
able to continue to do Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
But also to your point, like I wrote this as, the first question I asked myself when I was asked to pitch was, again, not knowing anything about the movie other than, it's going to be set in a new town, was, what is my Blue Beetle movie? If this was DC Films asking me to write a Blue Beetle movie, what is my movie? Because that is how I view graphic novels. I view graphic novels, as the equivalent to film, and I view single issues the equivalent to like TV. Where you need, cliffhangers and, but yeah, so that's where it started really. It's like, what would be my Blue Beetle movie? And maybe one day some stuff from our book will show up in other mediums, hopefully. And
Hopefully.
we can see it in that form too. But for now, I just tried to write, what I would do in that, scenario of having one full complete story to tell.
And Jacoby, you got to illustrate this book,
Mhm.
Blue Beetle Story, and you get to tell the story. And I know we've talked in the past when you were on before too about stories that are important and things like that, like Frontera and stuff like that. It's very important to you guys to tell these stories because there's more to it than just a funny book. There's a deeper meaning to it, but not. And then another thing is, I think another person who mentioned online, and it wasn't it's not preachy to people who don't. People just, there's this difference between people who just want to escape the world that we live in and read comics, and then there's the people like myself who are like, well, I like to escape a little bit. I want the two truths and a lie to be the lie be the superhero and the two truths be what's going on in the world. But you get to just illustrate this, and you get to tell a story along here with Julio, your partner in crime here, on this Blue Beetle. What has the experience been like? Has it been fun? Has it been stressful? Has it been you never want to work with Julio
It's
again?
been horrible. Just constant yelling over text, voice memos, and everything. Just what the hell is this? No, it's honestly been amazing. I'm probably gonna be working with Julio for as long as I live. Whoever dies first, we'll see.
Yeah.
That's
No,
awesome.
it was the same thing. I mean, I'm texting him throughout the whole process, getting questions, and like we're just always like trying to brainstorm like for a hopeful book two, just something that we've always been collaborating, and this process was nothing different, if anything better, just because we've had the years now to go towards it. So it's just amazing. I love working with them.
There you
I
go.
feel the
Now,
same way.
it's said on this podcast. Now you guys have to work together forever. There's
Well,
nothing you guys.
we already got two more
Yes.
books already that we're
Yeah,
contracted for
So
next.
contractually, we probably are working together for
Yeah.
a while.
that's what you say it. We love each other. It's my best friend. Contractually, I have to say that. We've
Yeah.
got two books coming out. No, I'm glad, Julio. I'm glad you mentioned the idea of that it's in a real U.S. city, because as a not a huge DC fan, one of my biggest complaints about DC has always been, or the DC versus Marvel
Sure.
thing, is that that Marvel is like, when my son's 3, so when he goes to New York City, he could be like, "Where's Spider-Man?" He can't go to Gotham City. There's no actual Gotham City out there. Well, there probably is a Gotham in this country. I don't know for sure.
Thank God there's no Gotham City for your kid to visit.
It's so dark. No, but the idea that it's based in a true real city, I was like, it didn't even dawn on me until you said that it actually was a real city. Like, I've just been so used to reading Marvel and to have a El Paso being a real place, and would be in a Marvel comic book. They would do that. And so it being a real place, it just added more, authenticity to it. But also the story is not. what you guys discussed in the story and the story is about is not new in this world we live in, but it's so timely right now too. Like it's just like this book couldn't come out at a better time, in my opinion. It's like, right before this political climate we're in November coming up here. It's coming out right before that. It just brings awareness to some things that have been going on for a long time, but it's like been insanely magnified and insanely amplified over the past 5-6 years. And so like I really was, I love that about it, is that it's like it's timely and thought provoking, as well as a you know Scarab is helping fight some crime and kick some
Sure.
ass.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I hate that about the book. I would love for this not to be timely anymore.
Yes.
But I think to your point, the reality that we've been living in, I think this heightened because this has been, this has been going on, these things have been going on, just maybe not with the sort of mainstream news coverage that we've seen over the last 10 years. And there was a part of me when I was writing this book it must have been 2 years ago at this point, that when everything was heating up in El Paso, I did think, like, is this still going to be relevant? When this book comes out in 2 years, and unfortunately it is,
Yes.
but a big part of the story, like, is also that, and I think we haven't actually like talked about what it's actually
Yes.
about, but it is a coming of age story,
Yeah.
right? It's about our Jaime in this story, when it's an origin story. So he starts out without powers. He's this kid who is obsessed with stargazing and astronomy, and he has seen like the cycles of this immigration conversation and El Paso being villainized, and uses this sort of like political pawn on the national stage. He's seen those cycles happening, to the point where it doesn't really affect him anymore. It's just a way of life. He knows that, yeah, there's troops at the border again, but they'll be gone in a few months and it'll go back to normal, and then they'll be back. So he's very disengaged politically. Whereas his friends, include especially Brenda, are much more engaged, right? And I think the journey that he goes on through the story is not just about embracing these powers that he finds himself with. It's also, a story of a different kind of political radicalization, but one that is radicalized by, him seeing these dangerous words that are, maybe shared online turned into real danger on the streets. And the way that these hate groups come together in the story, and he, as the Blue Beetle, has to stop them while also fighting an actual alien invasion of the Reach. But so it's at both times a coming of age story, and also this superhero sci-fi adventure with aliens. And for us, it was also really important for that to be at the core of it, right? Like there was I come into it with a pretty strong point of view, and I want to, use these characters to say something, and hopefully also use it to teach and to make people aware of things. But at the end of the day, like, it's really, this sci-fi superhero story. And we wanted to make sure that that was truly like at the core of it, and everything else was in service to that.
It definitely is. Like you could tell that it's a Blue Beetle story. And I do, like, as a person who is also not a huge DC fan or person, is that I don't know a lot about Blue Beetle. Actually, most of what I know about Blue Beetle right now is from the movie, probably, because I haven't sit there and read a bunch of Blue Beetle stuff. So having it be an origin story to help me, because it made me sit, okay, now I'm learning with this character from the beginning. And also, I believe I'm part of a graphic novel book club at my LCS, and it's always hard to pick DC or Marvel books to read, because you need something it's like, oh, this is pretty good. This is standalone. Like we read Spider-Man Life Story last month, and it's like, oh, this is pretty standalone. Like it tells through, but like there's other characters in there you kind of have to have previous knowledge to kind of understood. So by the time it was over, people were like, I still didn't understand it as much as I'd like to, because I'm not into Spider-Man. And I was like, well, this gives you the opportunity to get a news story, but also you really don't need to know anything. Like you're taught from the beginning of this first page to the end of this about this character and about this world that he lives in, which is amazing. That, in addition to, you could have easily avoided what's going on in the world right now, though. Like it's like this whole, I mean, I don't know, the LeBron James quotes from back a couple years ago where someone said just shut up and play basketball, the whole thing. And it's like you could just say shut up and just write comics, but you don't avoid it, but you also don't overly do it. And that's why I think for this story becomes very purposeful, as well as being a origin story and a superhero story. It's just, I don't know. I just when I read it, when I got done with it, I was like, I like the way where you went with it. Had this perfect balance of everything, which
Thanks.
is not to make you guys' heads really big and
well,
fit off the screen here, but
you did mention our Eisner nomination. No.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was like. They started off, your head was really small, and now it's really no. But it's true. It's a true. I don't know. I think, like I said, the biggest thing I think I took out of it is it's poignant, but also it's an origin story. And to me, that was huge because now I can really recommend this to anybody. I could say, here, read this book. You don't need to know anything. Just pick this book up and read it, which is awesome.
Yeah. And that was important to me, mostly because I just hate continuity.
Yes.
Jacoby's really good at that. I've done some like single issue stuff at the big two. And he, like he said before, Jacoby and I are really close. We talk about all our projects, whether it's together or working with other people. And he's generally been the person that I'll tell him an idea. He's like, well, actually, there's this continuity. And that always just, it's always a point of frustration for me. Because I want to tell stories that anybody can just jump into. Those are the stories I like reading, like I don't have this encyclopedic knowledge of all DC and Blue Beetle, continuity and chronology. But I've read what I care about, right? And I want to tell stories within that. So I think that's what's great about this line that DC has, this, young readers line, the YA middle grade line, that you can just tell these stories out of continuity because you're writing. We make these books for, whether it's Frontera or this, we make it for all ages, really. But the market for it is 13 to 17. So, these kids are not reading, all of this old DC continuity. Jacoby does a really good job and like a really fun job at like putting Easter eggs in to the book. I think that's maybe the only piece of real feedback that he got is he was asked to take away some of the Easter eggs. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
Which one are we referring to? Because I feel like there's a couple.
Well, there was one that it was a brand, right? Like you were mixing a brand with a DC character and you had to pull it.
Yeah, I definitely did like a Lex News and Fox News because I was like, oh, there's an X and there's 3 letters, and I was like, no, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah,
They didn't like that one, which is I get it.
Well, it's funny how you mentioned that.
It's
I'm
like-
reading right now. Clay McLeod Chapman has a book coming out called "Wake Up and Open Your Eyes," and it's about watching this guy's parents watching TV and getting sucked into fax news, FAX news.
Yeah.
And I was just like everything else he talks about on the entire thing, CNN, all that stuff. It's the one station that they just call fax, FAX. And I keep on reading it, and I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah, so like basically I was like, hey, yeah, our villain's Lex Luthor's bad, but he's not like he's not associated with that. He just doesn't like Superman.
There's limits to
Yeah.
his evil.
Yes.
Trying to think about it. I think there's a couple other ones where likenesses are just like some of like the right wing YouTubers just look
Yes.
Yeah.
like DC villains, and those just like that same kind of like we're not gonna do that.
Which is funny because
Yeah.
a 13 to 17-year-old might not even, it might just go over someone's head
Yeah,
anyway, because
exactly.
most of them aren't going to be really too entrenched in that anyway. But yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah,
That's what you get your most feedback in. I guess that's pretty good, right? I mean, if that's what they don't want you to do, is things like that. I'm guessing, and it's playful. It's comical artwork. Your artwork style is perfect for the story, I think, as well. Was there some important things that you did want to put into this when you're in visualizations on this that you got to do, or is that just you're just drawing?
I mean, kind of like I think I've talked about this with you for It's Only Teenage Wasteland, and like even though like a lot of the graphic tees and like whatnot are like Easter eggs as well, but like that street where vibe. I like did a lot of research and was actually like scoping a bunch of like El Paso high school, like their Instagrams, just like seeing like what are kids wearing. Let me just make sure it's not, I don't just self-impose just how I like to dress onto these people. And also, I mean, like, you know, other than the aliens, yeah, the story's like super grounded. And I had like my Google Street View open like the whole time I was drawing, and I like drew reference from like real places in El Paso. I mean, we have the El Paso Star. There's Chico's Tacos.
Yeah, Cielo Vista,
Yep. Oh yeah, that
where the whole third
park
act
with,
takes place.
yeah, the third act with the park that has like an alligator fountain,
Hmm.
which I was like, this is truly like for the people in El Paso. Because I mean, I low-key when I was drawing it, because like there's a shot with the alligator fountain. So people from El Paso, like that is purely for them, because for everyone else, I feel like they might be like, why, what are these alligators? You know, this
That
isn't
means
like
a
a
lot to
kill.
people from that area, though. It does. I mean, from
Exactly.
certain
And
areas. Like I was reading Local Man from Tony Fleece and Tim Seeley, and in the second issue, where you open it up, there's a big Paul Bunyan statue. And I'm in Maine, and I live in Maine, in Bangor, Maine. We have the identical Paul Bunyan statue. It's not from Maine, but it's just like, to me, I was like, it meant so much to me because I'm like, that's down the street from me.
yeah, yeah,
Jacoby's
So,
for the
yeah.
people.
yeah, so
Yeah,
the El
no.
Paso people reading this book are gonna be like, oh my gosh,
No,
I know exactly where that is.
so yeah, I mean, I wanted to match the groundedness
Yeah.
that Julio like put into the script. I don't want to like do that and just draw a random location that's slightly El Paso related.
Well, that's
So
what they do in
yeah,
the movies, right? They just do in
yeah,
the movies.
Yeah.
They shoot you El Paso. It's really some random
yeah. Just
state.
throw on the sepia tone, and you're like,
Yeah.
yep, we're nearby the border.
Well, it's so
uh,
funny also, like thinking about, I never even thought about the idea that you can use things like Street View
yeah,
for that. Like, years and years and years ago, you would have to get like on a plane or a bus or something like that and drive to El Paso to actually see what El Paso looks like. Now you can just like quickly Google it.
yeah, no,
Yeah, and not
and
just that, like part of the references that I put in the script, like one of them was just like a walking tour of like downtown El Paso for one of the scenes, and I was
mhm.
like, this is where I want this scene to take
Mhm.
place, and he just had a video that he could use as reference.
I had a backtrack in Google like a store that I saw there, and I was like, because I couldn't find, like, I saw the video and that's helpful and all, but I need the
Mhm.
street view.
Mhm.
And I like from that video, yeah, like backtracking where I'm just like, okay, I think this, oh, there's that downtown sign, so there we go. I'm gonna work with that. And yeah, like a lot of big locations in the book are like based like the high school,
El
um
Paso High.
Yep.
the even the auto shop was like loosely referenced off of the shop that I just was like, this looks like the perfect location.
Mhm.
For months afterwards, your two Instagram feeds are just like, you want to travel to El Paso, don't you?
Well, worse
Basically.
than that, we I started following I feel like every city or has one of these where it's like a meme account for
Yeah.
things that are like related to this town. So for El Paso it's called FitFam El
Hmm.
Paso. And I still follow it, but like, it's because I have a few friends from El Paso.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I use them as kind of like advisors in a way, to like told them the story, walked them through it, got some feedback on it. Make sure you put Chico's in, make sure, you do this, follow this account so you can just like see what's happening in El Paso. And for me, like research is a huge part of
Mhm.
every project that we do. And that's part of it, like interviewing people, just to like talk to people from wherever a project is set. And then also things like that, just like online following accounts, looking at location tags on Instagram too, right? Like I think Jacoby alluded to that earlier, but like looking at the location tags for like El Paso High, right? And like how kids are dressed, right? Doing things that are like relevant to that area. Like, we gave one of the main characters, Paco, we gave him an Edgar haircut. Which I don't know if you're familiar with the Edgar, but it's very much definitely very like Mexican
Oh
American
yeah, yeah, yeah.
teenager,
It
but
is.
also, it crosses borders throughout like the Latino youth.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of them had an Edgar, which I've been wanting to do for a long time in a book.
Yeah. That was a good one. I'm glad we got to do that one because that one really is for it. Like, hey, if you're Mexican, this is that. Like, you'll see that haircut and you'll be like, yeah, this is an Edgar. They threw an Edgar in the book.
That's amazing. I mean, it shows that you got both of you care about the story. It's just not just in the book itself. This is not just a paying gig. I got to get this done, and so on and so forth. Like there's passion that goes into these writing, and I think that it shows in the end that the story is extremely well written. And I was, like I said, poignant, timely to me again. As much as I also hate that it's also timely, but yeah, it is, and it's one of those things that it's you can't avoid it at this moment. And so having that, and then the origin story part of it to me is huge. We quickly touched on that when you disappeared there for a second, Jacoby. But like the origin story of it all is huge because again, this is something I can easily bring up to my book club and be like, this is a story that no one needs to know anything. Just read this story and we'll enjoy reading it, which would be amazing. But yeah. Quickly, before I forget, you actually wrote on Julio wrote on Urban Legends 21 for DC. And we just had Joey Esposito at my local comic book shop doing a signing, who also wrote on that, which is kind of funny. But it also reminded me of a quick story that he told me that he just wrote the Sesame Street comic, or the issue 1, and he said he brought like 5 different pitches to them and what they wanted for a Sesame Street comic, and the 6th pitch was the one that actually got picked up.
That's how it goes sometimes. When I did that Urban Legend story, I pitched 3 ideas, and they chose the one that I thought was the least likely to get chosen.
I told Julio not to throw in a throwaway, or not a throwaway, but just a pitch that you do not want to do, and it was just, yep.
Yeah, it wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It was just that I was like, oh yeah, they're not gonna let me tell the story of how Renee Montoya was like a corrupted cop at first, and now it's coming back to like haunt her. But that was I'm glad I got to do that one. But yeah, so that's how it goes. Like, luckily all it took was the one. I only had the one Blue Beetle pitch anyway.
Yeah.
So, I was really hoping that they wouldn't say no to all of it, and I'd have to just come up with something brand new.
What else you got? Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but also like that's also not the world that we're coming from, because of the work that we do in the book market. Like the pitching process is very different. We're telling original stories, and we're just, our agent is taking this pitch to a bunch of publishers, and the ones that want it will tell us, and then we'll decide on which one to go with. But it's much less of this like big 2 direct market pitching process where like you're throwing multiple pitches out at the same time. Like this is the story we want to tell, and let's just find the right home for it. And that's kind of how I approached this one as well, because like I said, I didn't have anything else to I have more Blue Beetle stories in me, but in that moment, that's how I wanted to start it. I didn't want to start with something different than that.
Yeah, it turned out extremely well. And I will say, some other people online agree with me that if this is the future of what DC stories could be like, this is definitely, a great beginning to that, or start of that, because, hopefully they'll tell more stories like this in the future over at DC. I think I even put in my review about those in charge. That like those people in charge of reading my review, but it's okay.
Let's hope they are. Forward it to Jim Lee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just like I said, you 2 partnered together, create good stories in the first place, but also just like if they do more like this over at DC, I will become more of a fan of it. I just came into it. My biggest thing is I came into it too late. Again, the whole you mentioned Julio about like going back and reading older issues, the continuity of it all. Like I followed the continuity of Marvel for years and years and years and years, and so it's easy for me to jump in and be like, oh, I know I know where that's come from. But for me to jump into a DC story, I'm just like, I'm gonna have to start at the beginning, and I definitely don't have time for that. I'll tell you that right now. So that's why these stories are great. These origin stories, these one-off kind of stories are where I'm at, because it's a lot of fun to get involved in the character, and then having a Blue Beetle have a movie out, within recent time, brings the character to the forefront, and allows people to be like, go to their LCS or their local bookstore and be like, you have any Beetle stories? Like, hey, we've got one just right here.
Yeah.
Just came out. I think
Yeah.
that's huge. And I'm so pumped that this book was made. Yeah, I think it's worth picking up. What do you guys think?
Thank you. Yeah,
Do you agree?
know,
think so.
I encourage everyone to check it out.
For sure, for the art at least.
Yeah, just for the art.
I mean, it is a picture book, right? Funny
Yeah.
book. No, it comes out October 1st at bookstores everywhere, I believe. That's at because I mean it used to be DC was a Tuesday as well, so I think it's if you're gonna get your local bookstore, I think it's the next day, but I don't know how that works exactly nowadays.
Yeah, bookstores are Tuesdays.
Yep.
Now that I think DC's back on Wednesdays, so
Wednesday, yeah.
in comic shops it'll probably be Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, on Wednesday, but either way, and you can get it. We recommend bookshop.org if anybody wants to order online because it supports local bookstores as well, and you can pre-order that now, which is pretty cool. And I think they give you a little deal right now. I think it's like 10% off or something like that right now, which is pretty cool on there. But yeah, and then obviously Frontera, you could get that too out there.
Yeah,
and
please
then
get that one.
you two are working away at other stuff too, so I'm excited to see what else comes from the pairing of you two in the future.
Thank you.
But this Blue Beetle story is wonderful. This Land is Our Land. A Blue Beetle story is available October 1st. Anything else?
Pick up Frontera for sure. Pick up our other books. Pick up Teenage Wasteland from Jacoby.
Yes.
Home.
Home,
And
see?
Home, all the books. And follow us on social media so you can keep up to date on our upcoming projects. Jacoby and I have another book in 2026. It's a middle grade book. Then we have another YA in 2027. Maybe some more DC stuff. We're graphic novels take so long, way, I've already written the book that comes out in 2027. Jacoby's about to start drawing it. These things take a while, so we got more stuff coming.
It's just funny. It's also like one of those book market things is like in graphic novels fall into the original graphic novels fall into that book market side of things is that it's funny because I've known about this for months and it's like I usually don't even find out about a comic book until like FOC to date. You're like, oh, that's coming out here pretty quickly. With the graphic novel, you're like, oh, this is gonna look so cool. Wait, 6 months from now? What the hell? I can't. I don't. But I will say
we made this book way faster than any other book we've ever made. I think we made it in like a year and a half from the time I started writing to he finished drawing, which is kind of like crazy when you consider, Frontera was like 3 years from the time I started writing to the time he finished drawing. So yeah, can't complain about the timing on this one.
Speed on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of it's fun. You say 13 to 17. I think one of those things I've always talked about with the young adult or younger YA stuff is that just because it says that doesn't mean it's not. It's basically meaning that someone under the age of 13 probably shouldn't read it. But that it means that anybody over the age of 13 could read it, and that those who get the most out of it would probably be the 13 to 17 year olds. So everybody should read it though if you're a fan, and even if you're not, if you want to jump into DC like myself and read something different, Blue Beetle is worth checking out. And again, like Julio said, go see it. Download the movie on streaming or whatever it is, or buy the Blu-ray.
Legal ways.
Yes, I said streaming. I corrected myself there. I'm like download. No, don't download. Stream it online or buy the Bluray or something like that.
1, 2, 3.
Just in case Jim Lee is listening to this, let's let's.
I actually think it's XYZ freemovies123.org. But no, so check that out. But yeah, definitely check out Blue Beetle at your bookstores everywhere starting October 1st. Thank you both for joining us on the podcast and taking time out of your busy schedules to come here and chat about your graphic novels and books and stuff. And we look forward to talking to you both in the future. Sound good?
Hell yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.